Hi, I'm Connor Greene. This is the first attempt at doing one of those on our own. I work with children with ADHD and autism and all the comorbid conditions that's associated with those neurodiversities. I work with families over telehealth and in person, and I help around working around all the deficits that take place because of these. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Christy. I work um, in a primary school in Queensland, and I'm autistic, or I like to call myself ADHD. So I'm autistic, and I also have ADHD. I have co-occurring ADHD. I also have generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD and complex PTSD. So lots of layers of stuff.
One of those where it's like you get one and just throw the rest of them on the
That's right.
pile. Just
Yeah. When I
collect
got
all you can.
when I got my diagnosis, or my diagnoses, I should say, and they kind of trickled in over about a 18-month period. As I was getting my diagnoses, I felt like I was playing Scrabble, like just collecting all the letter tiles and hoarding them for myself. But yeah, no, like it's as an educator, I'm late diagnosed, and I was diagnosed in my 50s, and I have looked back at my life retrospectively and recognized all of the difficulties and the challenges and the emotional turmoil, I guess, that goes with not being diagnosed and being an intelligent person who should be able to reasonably do all the things. And when you can't do all the things, the judgment that goes with that can be quite devastating to your self
It's
esteem
seen as
and
like
self
personal
worth.
failings.
Yeah, yeah. So the characteristics of my disabilities were exactly what Connor just said, were seen as personal failings and things that I wasn't trying hard enough to do. I was lazy. I was unmotivated. I was all of those negative things. I think I saw a list that you posted the other day, Connor, on Facebook about I don't want to
If you
label my
don't get the
child.
label, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to label my child, but your child gets labeled anyway because it gets labeled with all of those negative things like, yeah, unmotivated, lazy.
Clumsy, naughty, bad,
Yep,
selfish. Let's I'm gonna pull it up very quickly.
yeah. It's your kid's going to get labeled no matter what you do. You just need to make sure that it's a label that enables them to A, understand themselves better, and B, isn't creating a negative feedback loop, I guess, that just
It's
makes things worse and worse and
it's
worse.
bad that I went off a list that I could think of all the things that the kids have told me
Yeah,
or that I've
that's
heard people call them. So it's like naughty, lazy, defiant, rude, clumsy, distracting, forgetful, selfish, problem child. The defiant one surprisingly really stuck out to me because that was in an email from a teacher that said that the child was being defiant. And I requested more information over what had happened. And they said that the child was hiding under their desk and refused to come out. And I went, did you just start the sentence with saying hiding and defiant? Why was the child hiding?
mm,
That doesn't sound like defiance. When have you heard of a 14-year-old child hiding under a table for fun?
sounds like the kids attempt to create boundaries and
It's
because of overwhelm and they're
yeah.
just being judged for it.
It's like they have completely shut down. They are hiding. How did you label that as defiant?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they
Um
weren't doing what the teacher wanted, so that's why they were labeled as defiant. But the term defiant in itself is so low. It's such a loaded term, isn't it? There's so much extra judgment
yeah.
on that, like, encapsulated within that one word, that it's automatically a really, really negative word to use to describe a child. And defiant, yeah, it's very, very loaded. There's a lot carrying, a lot riding on that one word. And if that kid is told that they're being defiant, like that's just, again, it's just creating all of that
It's
cycle
one of
again.
those.
It's
It's a lot of the words either carry so much more to them. There is so much more that is at play, or you have words that are completely useless, like lazy. I don't believe in lazy. I don't think that it exists because there is always going to be an underlining reason to the behavior. Saying the word lazy is just a lazy person's way of expressing something. They go, "You're just being lazy." Could you give some more thought to that to give an explanation, or is that as much effort as you're going to put in yourself? It's
it,
almost like,
it's a
and
lazy
I
word.
understand the irony of using the word lazy to describe a person that describes the word lazy. That was on purpose. Um,
Mm,
before anyone comes at me. But it's almost the same as when people say the child is just attention seeking. And I
mm.
hate that word because it doesn't help anything. It doesn't explain anything. And I often tell it's often teachers that use that word. And I think I know why. And I think it's because we grew up hearing that behavior is attention seeking. And so it's now the only explanation that we have. But it's not helpful. And I often say, can you replace attention seeking with connection seeking? And just see if it makes you think a little bit harder.
Or even
And it
just
often does.
softens.
They sort of pause and go, okay, yeah, there's a need that's not being met. Like, yes.
Well, behavior is communication. That has been long established, and every behavior that a child exhibits is communicating something. And if you dig hard enough, you can find out what that communication is. Like the we got kids here at school who they have difficulty regulating their um, their actions. So they have a lot of trouble with that
Yeah.
self-regulation, which you would expect. It's perfectly reasonable to expect or understand that a 9 or 10-year-old has difficulty regulating their own behavior and emotions because the part of the brain responsible for that hasn't developed yet. And so we place an awful lot of expectation, and yeah, we set a standard for children that they can't possibly reach yet because their brain hasn't developed sufficiently to be able to do that. And so, and when I see teachers, I'm going to swear, so just please excuse me. I see teachers lose their shit at a kid or at a class for being silly or being naughty. And I'm like, but you just lost your shit at them. So where's your self regulation? And I think that about adults a lot. And I
Oh,
think
it's
about
all
that
the
a
time.
lot.
It's all the time for me. I see there are so many double standards, and it's I think that adults and parents have higher expectations of their children than they hold themselves accountable for.
100%.
The and it's and this is not a dig. This is not a you know this is not throwing blame or anything at any parents that do this because I regularly encounter this and it's because there is so much more going on.
Mm.
But you will see that they will get absolutely infuriated at their child for not cleaning up their room. But if you were to walk into their bedroom, it could be so much worse, so much worse. And they will continue to hold the child accountable or punish the child or yell at the child, but they never hold themselves accountable. Not once.
And like
And
what I
I
struggled
also
with.
wonder if that comes from I also wonder if that comes from the the parent is always right, the adult is always right. As a child, if you are correct, you're then told no, they're the adult. You listen to them, and so it's sort of given us this hierarchy of we are now older, we are in charge, we are void of any sort of expectations. We've done our due diligence of childhood. Now it's our turn to
Mm.
yeah.
Like I
But
when I'm working with children, at school, I always start my lessons with the phrase, "You listen how you listen best." So if we're talking about
I like that.
modeling strategies for kids, you listen how you listen best. If you're someone who needs to have busy hands, then have busy hands, but just don't make it noisy because it's going to stop other people from learning. And if I think that you're using those busy hands, if the busy hands aren't helping you listen, then I'll ask you to stop. So you
Which
need to
happens
be
a lot.
able to show me that it's helping you listen and concentrate and not distracting you from what I'm trying to teach you. I've got, there's a thank you quilt in my office that some of the kids made for me a couple of years back to thank me for all the work that I'd done with them. And what's interesting is that there's 12 squares, and so 12 kids decorated a square each. And the number of times that the thank you for letting us listen how we listen best, the number of times that appeared on that thank you quilt, it was so affirming for me that the
That's
kids that
right.
need it, really, really need it.
I took it on
And
board.
absolutely. And they grew and they were stronger learners for it. So I think
Can I? Can
because
I?
yeah,
I want to double back to the busy hands
mm,
unless it's affecting your learning, because that's something that I have a bit of struggle with some people that are very, very, very. I don't want to use the word neuroaffirming because I don't want it to have this negative connotation to it. But there are people that very much push the idea of, stimming and fidgeting and all that, and it's
mm,
brilliant. It is absolutely,
mm,
it is necessary. But they forget the fact that, again, it's about regulation. And for a child that can't self regulate, they can go in the opposite direction. So stimming, and there are children that will stim or will be fidgeting, but then sometimes they focus way too much on the fidgeting rather than what is needed. And so you have to sort of intervene and go, we gotta,
mm,
redirect this again. We gotta take away some level of stimulation because there is the
yeah,
optimal stimulation theory
yeah, yeah,
that you can have too much or too little. I'm just glad that you mentioned the fact of like, it's brilliant unless it's now affecting
mm,
others
yeah,
or
yeah,
affecting yourself.
yeah.
That
And
was, yeah.
one of the ways that I monitor that is when I'm working with that group, I will have it sounds, I will call on some kids individually and I'll give them some thinking time. I'll ask them a question, give them some thinking time. But if they haven't heard my question at all and they go, what? Then I know that it's hindering, not helping. And that's actually a phrase that I just use with the kids. I said, hindering or helping at the moment. And they went, oh, hindering, and they'll put it away themselves. And so it's one of those things that you really have to carefully monitor, and you don't have to draw a huge amount of attention to it. And like I try and use small phrases as cues for my kids. So things like if I need them to just listen to what I'm saying, I'll say ears. If I need them to see what I'm showing them,
Ah,
it'll
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
ears and eyes. So all it is this is an ears task or an ears and eyes. So they know that if it's an ears and eyes, that I'm showing them something and they have to look up. So yeah, just lots of little cues that
Which,
I
by the way,
throw in
the
there.
hindering or helping, I've got a perfect example of this. I often listen to music whilst I'm doing work, and I know when it's starting to hinder me when I accidentally start typing the lyrics.
Yep.
It happens so often, and then I have to switch to something that's like a lo-fi chill music,
See,
or
I
just
listen
nature
to
sounds or
yeah,
something like
like
that. But
what I
if I
use when
don't
I'm
have anything, problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
what I use when I'm at work with my noise cancelling headphones if it's a bit noisy outside, or I use when I'm studying, and I need to just concentrate and drown things out. I tend to play movie scores on my on my phone.
Yes.
So it's particularly love Hans Zimmer. For some
Oh,
reason,
yes, yes. He's
his
great.
music.
He's great.
Oh, I've seen him play live twice, and he's phenomenal and reduces me to tears every time I've seen. Both times I've seen him. It's not every time, idiot. So yeah, I find that his music is enough to drown the sound out, but not distract me. So it's that
Well, I guess
sweet spot for me.
in movies, they don't want it to be, overpowering. They want it to be complementary.
That's right. And
Now,
so yeah.
I've got to ask you, how did you get into this line of work and why? Did you get into this line of work before you were diagnosed, or?
Yes. I've had my diagnoses for 4 or 5 years now, but I've been teaching for over, when I say teaching, for over 20 years. I've done maybe 7, 8 years of classroom teaching, and then all other aspects has been in leadership roles. Word salad. Policy development, resource development to support schools for different initiatives, and a lot of delivering of professional development for teachers on a range of different topics. So yeah, my dad. Okay, so how I got into this was my dad was a teacher. My dad was definitely a daddy's girl when I was growing up. Still am. My dad's amazing, and he was kind of one of my idols. And so I wanted to, when I was little, I would line my toys up and I would read them stories. I would read them my storybooks like you would reading to a class of kids.
Yeah.
So for a little while in my adolescence, so I've wanted to be a teacher my whole life. Just this long story short, wanted to be a teacher my whole life. And there was a brief period in my teenage years when my neurodivergent ideology and my little social justice warrior kicked in, and I wanted to do law so I could become a judge, so I could impose harsher penalties on criminals who hurt people or animals. So that was all I wanted to do. I didn't want to try any other cases. It was people who hurt other people or animals. And so, yeah, I quickly realized that to actually go and do a law degree would make me want to vomit because of the amount of memorizing that was required. I'm not good at memorizing. I'm good at synthesizing. And
Yeah.
I'm good at, capturing the essence or the gist of a passage or a text rather than having to remember things verbatim. That's not a strength of
Yeah.
mine.
No, I know exactly what you talk about. Yeah.
And because our brains, our ADHD aspect of our brain is hardwired for pattern recognition, and so yeah, we look for similarities and links, and we kind of file stuff into all the different places, and we make connections between ideas and things that other people may kind of wonder where that came from. And how did you work that out? Our brains make all the connections and recognize the patterns that others don't.
That's why I'm so good at spotting things and spotting signs and all that in children and in households. But I would fail every test thrown at me at school because it was all memorizing. I couldn't do it. If it was problem solving, no problem.
You know what's
Problem
really
solving,
interesting?
I'll get it solved. What's that?
What's really interesting, it's interesting that you say that because autistic brains, sorry, not autistic brains in general, one of the lowest forms of knowledge acquisition is memorization. And to be able to be efficient and effective at sitting exams, you have to memorize a lot of things. And
Yeah.
so what's really interesting is in my postgrad studies in disability and autism, there are no exams. And the one kind of quiz that we got It was only a small quiz. It was open book. And when I
Yeah.
asked them why it was open book, she said, the lecturer said, well, no one in real life ever doesn't refer to their texts and the research and the evidence. No one just does it off the top of their head. Everyone has reference materials with them
Yeah.
that they check and they double check, because the brain can only hold, so much information. And
I've had GPs that have had to, pull out textbooks in front of me.
yeah,
Which, by the way, I would much prefer a GP pulling out a textbook than guessing from their memory from something that they heard 45 years ago.
sorry, I'm just putting a piece of gum in my mouth because my meds have kicked in hard, and I've got
Yep.
bad dry
Dry
mouth.
mouth?
So
Yeah, no, you're all good. You're all good.
just let me chew my gum. Yeah, so
Helping,
I
not hindering.
helping not hindering. What made me want to go? What made me, I guess, to go back to your question about why I chose this career.
Yeah.
I guess my little social justice warrior soul wants to help the people that can't help themselves and to serve the underserved. And that's kind of my raison d'etre. So the reason one of the powerful reasons why it was so affirming to me to do it, to study education, was because I had a non-example. What has motivated me more in my life than any other thing has been, I don't want to be like that. So it's the non-example rather than that's the person I want to be like. That's the person I don't want to be like. So what about them is so repellent
That's
to
interesting.
me? And so I had a teacher in high school who, when I put my hand up in the first couple of weeks and I just said, look, I'm still not really understanding this. Is there a different way you can explain it to me? And the response was basically, well, there is no other way. If you don't know it, you don't know it.
Yeah,
And so I
I
kind of
got the
went,
exact.
so to me, that was the worst possible thing she could have done, because she activated my PDA. But she kind of flicked the switch that
You can't
made
do it
me,
any other
well,
way.
yeah. And what
Yeah.
happened was, like, she would often tell us that, no student has ever failed my class. So my response naturally with my little PDA is, oh, well, I'm going to fuck your average, aren't I? And I actively failed her class.
Yeah.
Like, I would literally write my name at the top of my tests and then push it to the top of the desk, put my arms, and just sit back and stare at her. Like, I actively
Brilliant.
failed her class because I was like, well, if you're going to refuse to teach me and do your job, then I'm going to refuse to cooperate with you and do my job. And so, yeah, I actively failed her class. And so she has always been this kind of powerful motivator in my head of, I don't want any child that I teach to ever have that experience of
Yeah.
being totally let down by the person that's educating them. Through that kind of, I guess, that reason for being, I've kind of my passion, I guess, and my focus areas have kind of morphed along the way. I've always had a passion for inclusion. I did a double
Yeah.
major in my education degree. I majored in maths and mathematics and inclusion. So I did a lot of subjects to do
So
with
was it like
disability
you
support.
had this drive to help? You had the drive to help and not, to let somebody else be failed by somebody that's meant to be there to educate them and help them. And along
Yeah,
the way, you then discovered why, all the reasons to why you struggled in
yeah,
certain areas. And now you're just
yep,
like, I don't want to let other people not know why they're struggling in these areas. I want to help them identify it, help them find it,
yeah,
help them find the way that works for them. Yeah.
yep. Like my class, like I had always taught upper school. When I say upper school, the lowest grade I've had my own class with was year 3. So I've taught year 3, year 4, but I've done most of my teaching was done in year 5 and 6. So the what was interesting is that my class always had a record number of referrals to the student support services team, where, because again, pattern recognition, I would look at the way a student was behaving and presenting and recognize particular traits. So yeah, I would refer these kids to our student support team. Our guidance officer would do whatever assessments they could do and then recommend to the parents to take their child to a pediatrician. And yeah, I had so many kids diagnosed with autism, ADHD. Well, I didn't diagnose. I didn't get them diagnosed.
You
I,
set them
I
on the
was the
pathway.
impetus. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was the impetus to them getting diagnosed.
I got a question for you. Do you ever feel that, because all I work in is with children with neurodiverse conditions and the families that will naturally have neurodiverse conditions, and all of my colleagues are neurodiverse. And so I almost convince myself that we are the majority, and I fear that I see it in everyone, except for if I go to do like a first aid course, because in Australia you have to do CPR every single year, and your first aid every 3 years. So every single year, I'll be sitting in that class and I'll be the only one that is. I, at one point, ended up turning my entire chair around,
Mm,
and because I was following the things on the board.
mm.
I'm just following it around the wall, and then realized that I'm facing the person behind me, and I go, sorry, turn back, and realized that at one point I was sort of like looking at something, and I eventually laid my head down, and then there was silence in the room. I sort of like looked up, and the instructor's looking at me going, "Are you okay?" I'm like, yeah, 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 no, I'm fine. Yeah, sorry, go on. And then I realized maybe we are the minority. I'm the only one in here.
This this is
I went
not
to
my
a
tribe.
I went to a school event, a school awards ceremony thing, and yeah, look, I started looking around and seeing everybody with their feet flat on the floor, backs up straight, staring, and I'm going, what is wrong with you guys? Is there nothing going on in your head? Like, how? That's weird.
Yeah.
I think just
Well,
recently,
well.
I went to
Sorry.
play like building towers with a child, and I was organizing the pieces in color and shape order. And the child comes back after using the bathroom. This is a 3-year-old. They come back and they go, "Have you finished building the tower yet?" And I'm like, "I'm working on it. I just have to organize these pieces first." And I realized this is very different to the children that I work with. 'Cause this child is not diagnosed with anything. And if this is how a 3-year-old is developmentally meant to
Hmm.
be at, I'm like, wow. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. So I just wondered,
Life makes sense now.
do you go, oh, we're definitely the majority, and then you'll look at a lot of the other kids and you'll go, wow, there is quite a large difference when you start to really put it into play.
We are definitely the minority. Um, and I know that just because of my interactions with my colleagues. The vast majority of them are neurotypical, and like I always felt kind of, well, still feel like a fish out of water when I go to like a staff function and I'm sitting there and I'm not talking, or when I do talk, I say what's in my head, and then I haven't adjusted what's in my head for the audience that I'm speaking to. And
Yeah.
so I say stuff that's really inappropriate. Like I'm renowned in my family for lowering the tone of every conversation I'm in, because my mind goes straight to the gutter, and um, I have a very crass sense of humor most of the time. And so what I find hilarious, everyone else is like, oh my God. And yeah, so I I have to be careful with what I say around, and how, because my face um shows what my brain is thinking sometimes, and my face doesn't have a filter. So
I've got
my
the opposite problem.
Well, you have an
I get
excellent poker
I
face.
will I'll walk through shopping centers or something like that, and people that I know will go like, "Man, you look unapproachable. Like you look pissed off." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm like really fine. I'm sorry."
Oh, I've definitely got a resting bitch face as well, and it works really well for kids that don't know me, but it also makes them not like me, and so I
They
feel
can't get a
kind of
read on
bad.
you.
Yeah, yeah, and I've always been told that because I had a guy come up to me in a bar one night, and he just said, "Honey, smile. You know, the world's not." And I wanted to kind of
I've
punch him,
I've
but
I had somebody say that to me just recently,
yeah,
actually.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the the sky's not falling. Why are you so angry? And I looked at him and I said, "I'm not angry." And he said, "Well, tell that to your face." And I'm like, "Fuck off." So yeah,
Why do
but
you
I did
then why
get
do you look
told.
so angry? Well, I am now. A
Yeah,
complete
that's
stranger just
right. That's
approached
right.
me and
This this conversation is somewhat enraging, but no, I have been told that I have a back off vibe to people, and but then and I guess that kind of works in my favor a lot of the time because it
wow,
means
it
that
just
I
occurred
don't.
to me that I now realize I just realized why that gentleman sort of turned away afterwards. He told me, he's like, he pretty much said word for word exactly what you said then. And I turned to look towards him as to like, excuse me, because I wasn't sure I heard him correctly. And he's just went,
Mm,
oh, and sort of turned and walked away. Now I think
yeah.
I realize why. I probably turned, said to him in like the wrong tone.
Mm.
And I still looked angry, so he's probably just like, "Oh no, he's turned on me." Like, no,
He's a
I
serial killer.
genuinely had no idea what was going on. I'm sorry.
No, it was like yeah, the number of also my masking really comes out in public places. Like I will act because I've been told so often that I have like a resting bitch face. I tend to, head up and I tend to smile. Like I'll try and have a smile-ish face when I'm in public. And
Yeah.
if I catch someone's eye, I'll smile at them just so they know that I'm not a serial killer who's about to claim an extra victim.
You find that it exhausts you?
Yeah. That's why I hate going in public. I
I
hate grocery shopping with a passion.
I do it. I have the whole bubbly voice, the whole like, thanks very much. No, no, seriously, no, great. Grab the things and like, cheers to that, man, and sort of leave. And people hear it in like the videos that I narrate, and they go, if they know me in person, and they go, your voice isn't really like that. I'm like, yeah, I know. I have a very monotone, dry voice, and I capture it in the videos that I capture where I'll hear my voice and I go, yeah, I didn't think that I sounded like that at the time, but whoops. But it exhausts me. I can do maybe 3 of those videos narrating for a day, and that's like a minute each because I have to go back and check. It takes so much out of me.
Well,
I've
I
always
used
been
to.
told that I'm monotone, but I have been told from other people that they enjoy talking or expressing or opening up to me because my tone doesn't give them any sort of, they say it doesn't give them feedback, which is good because it doesn't necessarily give them negative or positive feedback. It's just a flat tone. They can just keep going. They're not worried about judgment in my tone or in my look.
Mm.
I was like,
And
well, I
maybe
guess
that's
that's a
why
positive.
you and I, the first time that we connected outside of the conference where we met, we talked for about 3 hours, I think it was, wasn't it? We
Yeah,
just sat
while the
and just
bloody
like
train horns and steam engines were going off.
those freaking steam engines.
I
But
do still remember the people next to us were
mm,
so glad when we left.
yes. Oh well, we just sat and talked and talked and talked and talked and talked, and
Yeah.
it's I think it's because we both well we both have a very similar, we have a same philosophy and on how what people deserve, I guess. Would that
Yeah.
be accurate? So
No, it's
what they
well, when
deserve,
I
what
when
they,
I first spoke to you outside of the conference, I had a personal situation going on, and that was I think from there, very easy to gauge exactly where my feelings were on certain
Mm.
situations. Um,
And
which, because we go so off topic, I do have one question for you, and this is something that's
mm,
been, because I'm so unsure about it. I know that there are problems with it, but I don't know exactly what to do about it. And that is that a lot of schools have started doing this thing where they put all the neurodivergent children into one classroom because they feel as though they will work better if things are directed directly towards them, which is not how things go. Just because they're neurodivergent doesn't mean that the exact same method works. They are still equally individual.
absolutely.
Um, but alas, they go, all right, we'll take them out of neurotypical classrooms and we'll put them into this special classroom. I have not actually found that to be beneficial. It's
It's
often
actually
the
that's
emotions are far higher, the sensory demand is far higher because the stim clashing between the kids. It might be a smaller classroom, but it's a lot louder.
I'm
Yeah,
genuinely struggling to understand why any school would do that
I think lack of
because
education.
it's actually a segregation model. It's not a
Yeah, that too.
it's
Yes.
it's the opposite of inclusion.
Yeah.
And like there it's very, very clearly set out or stated in, and I'm speaking for Queensland
Well,
here,
you
but
see, it would also be like the same sort of thing as, special needs classes or learning development classes.
exactly.
But
It's going backwards. It's the
yeah,
opposite of what inclusion is and what it's supposed to be. Inclusion is supposed to be making all students feel like they belong, that they're valued, that they're respected.
I worry that it will just separate them from, and there are studies that show that like if you have, a bunch of black mice
Mm,
in a cage in a field, and then you introduce a white mouse later on,
mm,
they will ostracize it. They will push it away. But if you
wow.
breed them all together, there's no difference.
Mm,
And that is what has been shown throughout human
mm.
history.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you suddenly have, let's going to separate two types of people with their learning needs or anything, and it's
Mm,
because it's not just learning needs, it's their social needs and the way that they act and the way that they behave, and then they meet later on, you're going to have the same problems.
yeah.
Uh, I understand the effort to it. Haven't really got a solution for it because I know that a lot of
The
kids struggle
solution to it
in
is don't do
regular
it.
classes,
The
but
solution is don't do it. Honestly,
I think it really
it
just is.
there are international standards for inclusive education that countries are expected to kind of move towards. What you're describing is the first step where most schools started in the past, where they had a special education classroom. It is the absolute essence of segregation, and it's taking education back, decades and decades. And I've got a research paper somewhere that I'll find and I'll send to you that actually looks at the 100-year history of inclusive education worldwide. So
It was about 11 years ago. 11 years ago that the one child I knew was in specifically special needs classes and they weren't
yeah.
in any other classes.
Well, they're not allowed to
And
do that unless they attend a special school nowadays.
they got no development in that classroom at all.
No, of course they
It
wouldn't.
was terrible. They didn't get any help in the typical
Mainstream
classroom
classroom.
either.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel as though that was for something very different. Again, I
Well,
think it just falls back to education.
yeah, and,
It's
and
on
you
how
know
to
that just because kids have got autism does not mean they're compatible with each
yeah,
other.
yeah.
And just because imagine the chaos of dumping, essentially that's what segregation is. It's just dumping all of those kids into one space. Imagine the chaos of me being in there with my high sensory needs to sound, another kid being in there with high sensory needs to light. I can't see in the dark. I don't. I granted, light is probably the
Yeah,
last
that's
thing.
something. So
light is
many
the
kids
last thing that
like the lights
overloads
off.
me.
I need the lights on. Um, I'll
I
fall
mean,
asleep if the lights are off.
yeah, yeah, and it hurts my eyes to constant. I feel like I'm straining all the time when it's
Mm,
dark light. But yeah, you get a whole bunch of kids in there with incompatible needs with each other, and so you're trying to make an environmental adjustment for that child, to suit the kids that have got the high sensory, or the sensory sensitivities to sound, and then you've got another bunch of kids in that same room that are sensory seeking
yeah.
for sound.
Yep.
So you have the sensory averse versus the sensory seeking. You put all them in one room. It is not physically possible or viable to
Accommodate.
support all those kids with what they need. You can't have a one size fits all system of support for anyone. I look at my needs as a ADHD adult compared to my colleague who also has ADHD. Our needs are quite different because, obviously the combination of the autism and the ADHD means that my needs are different to either of those groups stand alone. So, and how they weave together, you can't really pull them apart. Like it's all adds up to being who I am. But if you tried to put in place what I need support wise to be able to be effective at my job, if you were to impose those needs on my colleague, it would be totally the wrong fit. But the problem is well, I guess the benefit is, as adults, we have agency and we can say that's not going to help. And this is why whenever we
You
have
have the
like we can
autonomy.
plan, yeah. Whenever we are planning, whenever I'm working with a team at my school to um, identify the support needs and strategies for kids, we'll have our conversations and we'll think, this should work, this should be good. But I always ask the kid, it doesn't matter how old they are, I say, we would like to do this. Do you think this will help you with your learning? Or do you think it will not help? And they're
I'm
remarkably
going through a
honest.
trial and error with another kid myself at the moment.
Yeah, they're
We
remarkably
basically said
honest
like,
about it.
this might not work. We're going to trial it. We're going to see how it goes, and then we're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Mm. Yep. And have you asked the kid what he thinks will help?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, the problem is the things that he thinks will help him have not been
Mm.
helping him.
Right.
Um, but it's he doesn't want to change it because that's what he's always done. And so we've had to have a very long conversation about the fact of we're going to need to break it and it is going to be uncomfortable.
Mm.
It will be disruptive and it's going to take some time to then get used to that to see if it's going to work. And it's something that has taken him a long time to trust in the process and trust in me and trust in his parents to start changing these things around. And I'm very, very proud of him. But that's just the thing. We don't know what's going to work until we try it. And when you've got a child that also, you know, struggles to identify their body's needs or express their needs,
Good old alexithymia.
yeah, you sometimes have to make the executive decision. And that's also where connection comes into play. Control, you're not going to get there. You need that
No.
connection. You need that
Yeah,
relationship with the person. Um,
because that the connection versus control, it all
yeah.
comes down to trust and mutual respect.
Yes.
So you're like you respecting the child or the student, and then them respecting you reciprocally. Like I don't ever walk into I don't ever have kids that come into my come into a group that I'm running or a session I'm running and expect them to immediately respect me. What I
Yeah.
say to them is, I will show you respect. I expect you to show me respect back. And what I try and create, the kind of, I guess, the mood and the feel I try and create in my groups is one of peers and kind of
Yeah.
I don't talk down to kids. I don't
I've never
speak to
gone
them
for that
like
approach. Not once.
I don't speak to them like they're children. I speak to them like they're a human being. And
Yeah, thank you.
there's a very big difference between those two things. And it does come from that place of mutual respect, maintaining their dignity, because sometimes I see kids just get torn to shreds verbally by an adult. And it's not just at school, it's at shopping centres and in like at restaurants and all that kind of stuff. I see these kids get torn to shreds and made to feel like crap for being a child, or because they were left unsupervised by their caregiver, and so they were running around and being children because that's what they're going to do when they want to, or when they're not being supervised or don't have something to do.
Which,
And but then there's no attempt to rebuild that trust and that relationship and to show them that you still respect them.
can I add? So, because I'll often have parents that will wish to employ my services, and they say like, "Can you just come into the house and fix everything up?" And I have to go, "No, I can't. I have to train you to be me."
Yeah.
Because the connections that I have with the kids that I work with has been built over months. I can't just walk in and work with them. It just does not work that way. You have to be their peer. You have to be their friend. You have to have that connection. You have to have an understanding of who they are, and they need to understand who you are. And when, like, I had one child, they're now 16 years old, which is wild to me. They were turning 12 and they were having their 12th birthday party. And their mother asked, "Do you want Connor to be there?" And they went, "Yeah, he's like one of us. He's our age." And the other kids, they were just all running off. And so they listened to me, and it doesn't mean that I void responsibility as an adult because I'm a peer, because even as a friend, you can have a friend, you can go to a bar with them, you might do something silly, and they go, "Hey, come on. All right, we're mates. I'm not going to let you do something stupid." Because that's a peer. That's also a responsible friend. And that's the same thing that you need to do with the connection. It's you are a friend, you are a supportive friend. It doesn't mean that you void responsibility as an adult, which I think a lot of people seem to think when they say, "Don't be your child's friend." It's like, you can be your child's friend, but you still need to have that responsibility. It's the
Yeah.
responsibility of support of a friend,
Yeah.
of anybody. I
And you
wouldn't
also need
want
to
a friend
be
that would, that would just,
let me do dumb
yeah,
stuff.
that wouldn't be
Yeah.
supportive.
No, and it wouldn't be them being a friend.
Yeah.
So
So straight up, you're already showing them through mentoring that that is what a responsible person should do.
yeah, it's what I try and talk to the kids about when I have an opportunity is real friends call you on your crap.
Yes.
Like, does that make sense?
No, they do.
Like
Yeah, absolutely. Like many years ago, I had a friend that tried to dismiss the idea of, "Oh, I've only had a few drinks. I'll just drive down the road." And nobody spoke up, and I called him out on it and just went, "Don't be an absolute idiot, mate." Like, genuinely. And of
at a
course, he
similar,
was young, and
yeah,
everybody else after that, everybody else sort of went like, "Guess we should also speak up now." But it's like, yeah, don't friends should be calling you out on your actions.
yeah,
If you're being a bad person to, I would look at it in any relationship as well. If you see that your best friend is treating their partner horribly, call them out. If you see them, in any sort of situation, call them out.
yeah,
Because I think that's what they're meant to do. That's what a friend's meant to do.
yeah, and
Sort of got way off
like
topic there,
going
but that's,
going back to the drink driving thing, like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like there was one when I was still at
I think
uni.
we've all been in a
Yeah,
situation or close to a situation like that.
yeah, but like this situation was when we'd been, drinking since PM, and it was PM,
Mm.
and one of the guys that we'd been sitting there drinking with then said it basically, "Let's go." he got in his car. He expected all of us to get in his car with him and drive home. And I refused to get in the car. And my boyfriend at the time was just mortified because I was, making him look bad and look like a pussy in
Yeah.
front of his mates. And as it turns out, they had
Didn't
a
end
car
well.
accident. No, they had a car accident on the way home. And my boyfriend's brother, who was in the back seat where we would have been, the seatbelt snapped and he went flying out the window and then fell down. They crashed into the railing of a bridge, and so he got thrown from the car. He landed vertically on a concrete gutter down, down the bottom of the bridge and shattered his legs. He was in traction for 12 months, and when we got the news that there'd been an accident, I looked at my boyfriend and he looked at me and he said, don't say it. I'm like, I don't need to say it. I don't need to say I told you so. But,
It's almost like, they get scared to speak up because it's,
yeah.
no, I just told my child last night because I was dysregulated, and he tried speaking to me afterwards once I'd calmed down, that I was dysregulated and he wanted to address it. And I said to him, hey, when you're dysregulated, I need to speak up and I need to regulate you. Doesn't mean I need to put the blame on you. It just means that it's like, I need to support you in regulating you back. I need you to do the same for me. Okay? I know that I'm an adult, but I will also be dysregulated at times because that's just life. And I also have ADHD and I am autistic. So I need you to reciprocate that if you are in a better standing than I am currently. And he said, but I'm scared. Well, you're going to have to get over that now. You're going to have to start. You're going to have to start to push past that because you need to speak up when something is wrong. It's like, yeah, it's going to be difficult.
It's the bravest thing you can do, though.
Yeah.
Is like, and that's what made me very unpopular in the sport I was involved in for 20 plus years, is that I saw poor behavior and I tried to appropriately address it with the kind of the powers that be, and it made me very unpopular. And it got to the point where I was having to weigh up whether continuing in this sport that I loved was worth the impact to my mental health and therefore physical health. And what's really interesting is that I kind of stepped back from the sport altogether in August of 2023. And for the previous every single year, I used to get horrendously sick in winter. And what's really interesting is that after I stopped, I have not been sick at all.
The stress on your nervous system, the emotions,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that makes
So,
perfect sense.
like my immune system was significantly diminished and overwrought, I guess overworked, because of the amount of cortisol that was constantly being dumped into my body from the stress of suppressing emotions and having to swallow countless bitter pills.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's reached that point where I've now seen that we've been talking for almost an hour and 20 minutes.
Yes, it's not
So
surprising.
we're going to have to wrap it up.
Edit the crap out of it.
And I guess I'll see how well this recording has gone, and then see how, if we revisit this all in the future. Because I'm sure it'd be of benefit if I posted up on some of the groups and said, hey, if you've got any of these sort of questions, it may take us many sessions because we will overtalk and then get off topic. But
that's right.
It would be good to try and get to these questions. So.
No, I think that'd be great. Even just to have those frames for our conversations.
Yeah.
Just like a path that we can meander down. But yeah, well, I've got I do have. Actually, we should sign off.
We'll sign off. I don't know how to sign off. I'll just go. All right. Well, hopefully it all went well, and hopefully you enjoyed this. And
stay tuned for more if it was successful.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how prepared we are. That's brilliant. That's how you can tell that this is a natural conversation.
That's right.
Enjoy.
There's nothing scripted about this.